Well, you know, one of our favorite guests to go to is, well, frankly, anyone associated with the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, because it seems like all we hear from are people who want to boost taxes. They don't quite say it that way. They say, we need you to make an investment in, $50 billion for electric vehicle batteries. But the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, and I believe in them, for one big reason is they don't take government money, so they are not compromised. The leader of this fighting force is our friend Franco Terrazzano, and he joins us now via Skype from Ottawa. Franco, great to see you again. Happy New Year to you. 2026, before we get into the details of your latest memo, are you optimistic or pessimistic for this year from a taxpayer's point of view?
Well, I always like to think of myself as a happy warrior, so I'm a little optimistic, but I'm also not naive. Right. And I think one of the big issues that we're facing here in Canada is the crushing federal government debt. Right now, more than $1 trillion. Interest charges on the debt alone costing us more than $1 billion every single week. So, the next time you're standing in there in that checkout line, well, every single dollar you're paying in federal sales tax is now going to pay interest on the debt.
I got a question for you. I mean, I hear this from Mark Carney's apologists, and I even hear this from some provincial Ontario conservatives who are sort of chummy with Carney, and they say to me, Ezra, Mark Carney is more conservative than anyone since Stephen Harper. Well, okay, that means more conservative than Justin Trudeau. They say he used to work for Stephen Harper, which I guess is technically true. He was the Bank of Canada governor back then, I think. And they say that he's undoing some of the radical nature of the Trudeau government. Trudeau would never have signed an MOU for pipelines, even though I don't think the pipelines will likely happen. There's at least the fact that Stephen Guilbeault is having a hissy fit over it is maybe a good sign. And they point to the fact that there is a small $190 tax cut from 15 to 14% for the lowest income earners. And they're trying to say, no, this is Paul Martin all over again. This is the fiscally conservative Liberals. I don't buy it. What should I say the next time I encounter someone trying to say, no, Mark Carney is really a fiscal conservative? What should I say to them?
What's fiscally conservative about borrowing $80 billion in 1 year?
Yeah.
What's fiscally conservative about planning to borrow more money than Trudeau even planned?
Right.
I mean, look, if you're going to tell me that somebody's fiscally more conservative, right, more fiscally responsible than Trudeau, I'm going to be like, well, you just put the bar on the floor. I mean, Trudeau is the prime minister who doubled the debt in 10 years. And let's look moving forward. Okay, Carney plans to add, about $320 billion to the debt over the next handful of years? Well, over those same years, Trudeau was planning to add about $50 billion to the debt. So Carney's planning to borrow twice as much as what even Trudeau was planning over those same exact years. Come on.
Yeah. I want to let you know I wasn't buying it, but I just wanted to ask what your response would be. And by the way, lowering that tax rate by 1% on the lowest income earners, I mean, of course, it's better than nothing, but it's offset by so many tax increases. Why don't you go through some of them? I mean, an obvious one is the booze tax, isn't it? I mean, I'm not a big boozer myself, but, it's something that people use. Tell me how alcohol taxes are looking to go this year.
Well, I'm going to get into alcohol taxes in a second, but first, let's talk about another income tax hike, okay? Because not only do you pay income taxes, you also pay payroll taxes.
Right. That's the big answer,
federal government.
That's the big rebuttal.
Answer.
Yeah.
Yes, right there, right? So look, yes, is an income tax cut better than no income tax cut? Yes, it is better. Okay, but the income tax cut from Carney is going to save the average taxpayer $190, right? That's according to the parliamentary budget officer. But in the same breath, Carney is also hiking payroll taxes this year.
Right.
Okay, so if you're making $85,000, let's say, you're paying an extra $262 in payroll taxes this year. So look, okay, you're saving a couple $100 on income taxes, but many Canadians are also paying a couple $100 more in payroll taxes. And Ezra, all of this debate over one tax cut versus one tax increase misses the entire point. Canadians are already way overtaxed. Okay, right? More than 40% of the average family's budget is going to governments, all levels of government. So think about it this way, and it makes me want to puke. The average, or for the average family, their biggest expense is not the house they live in, It's not the food they eat or the clothes they buy. It's the taxes they pay.
You know what? I'm so glad. I wish I had some of these talking points at my fingertips when I was having a debate with my friend. Tell me a little bit about the carbon tax that's going up, because, of course, Mark Carney, in part, won the election by canceling the consumer retail carbon tax that Justin Trudeau was the centerpiece for him. But what about that industrial carbon tax, especially in Alberta? Tell me a little bit about what Carney's doing there.
Yeah, and first let's set the stage because, hey, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. The reason that the Liberal government canceled their own favorite tax, that consumer carbon tax, was because of ordinary Canadians.
Yeah.
Right? It was ordinary Canadians who told these politicians, if you want to keep your cushy political jobs, you better end that consumer carbon tax. But then, on the other side, Carney didn't end all carbon taxes. He's cranking up this hidden carbon tax on Canadian business. And look, that will make your life more expensive, right? Because a carbon tax on refineries, that makes your gasoline and diesel more expensive. A carbon tax on utilities, that makes your home heating more expensive. And a carbon tax on fertilizer plants drives up food for farmers and makes your groceries more expensive. But not only that, folks, okay, an industrial carbon tax is an economic sucker punch to Canada's economy. Right? That's what it is. Like, it's going to push our entrepreneurs to cut production here and set up shop south of the border. You asked me specifically about the agreement with Alberta. Well, Ezra, after Carney signed that agreement, he held a press conference and he bragged to the media that it meant a 6 times increase in the industrial carbon tax.
You know what? I think you're right. He was trying to shore up that Stephen Guilbeault base. I saw a picture the other day on Twitter, and I just checked it. I can't find it, but I remember seeing it, that the price of gasoline at a particular gas station in Alabama was $1.99. And Canadians might be saying, oh, well, wow, we pay $1.20 or whatever. But of course, in Alabama, they measure in gallons. So that's like 4 liters, right? Is it 3.8 liters to the gallon? So that would be like, I don't know, 50 or 60 cents a liter in Alabama. I don't think they have a lot of oil in Alabama. We've got so much oil in Canada, and our gas prices are, I think, about triple what they are in the U.S. I want to read something from your latest column. You wrote a column in the Toronto Sun. This was just before the new year, called Canada Needs Serious Tax Cuts in 2026. Let me read just one line. I'm reading your own column back to you, Franco. You said, just 12% of Canadians believe Carney that businesses will pay most of the cost of its carbon tax. We're talking about the industrial carbon tax. According to a Leger poll, nearly 70% of Canadians say businesses will pass most or some of the cost on to consumers. Well, of course they are. What else could they do?
Of course, right? And look, we kind of already talked about how obviously it doesn't matter what type of lipstick you put on your carbon tax pig. All carbon taxes make life more expensive. Right? Obviously. And Canadians get that. But one of the reasons we asked Leger to do that national poll is because we want to see if Canadians are buying Carney's carbon tax spin. Because early in 2025, right, during the election season that was going on, you had Carney essentially running around saying, oh, don't worry, folks. It's just big businesses that'll pay this carbon tax. Yeah. Well, clearly, Canadians aren't buying his carbon tax spin. Obviously, a carbon tax makes life more expensive. It doesn't matter what a politician tries to call it. But Ezra, here's another point, okay? Regardless of who is in the White House in the United States, whether it's a Democrat president, whether it's a Republican president, none of them are bringing in national carbon taxes. Right. Okay, so this is a fundamental hit to Canada's economic competitiveness.
Yeah. It drives me crazy for a decade now when Justin Trudeau and his environment minister, Catherine McKenna, and then Stephen Guilbeault and Mark Carney, who spent his whole career pushing what he calls net zero, they all have this weird manufactured factoid that I've never seen anywhere else in the world. They say, we need to have, a carbon tax and net zero on our oil and gas to sell our oil and gas, as if countries would not buy our oil without it. Listen, there are countries out there buying oil from Venezuela, from Russia, from Iran, China, India. They're desperate. They'll buy oil from anyone. They buy oil from Sudan, which is a genocidal, they slaughtered their own people in Darfur. There is no such thing as an oil buy. It's not like you're a fine wine. Oh, I'm tasting this wine. I'm tasting that wine. Oh, I'd never be associated with that wine. People buy oil because they need it. The idea that they wouldn't buy Canadian oil if we don't have all these bizarre carbon taxes or carbon capture. I've never heard anyone else in the world say that, but no one ever challenges Carney, Trudeau, when they say such kooky things.
Ezra, so shameless plug, when I wrote my book, Axing the Tax, The Rise and Fall of Canada's Carbon Tax, I had to do obviously a whole bunch of research. So maybe the numbers are slightly different because this was last year. I looked at the World Bank. Ezra, 70% of countries don't have a national carbon tax. And that was according to World Bank data, right? So the vast majority of countries around the world do not have a national carbon tax, including some of the world's largest emitters.
Yeah. Well,
right.
China,
so that was just bogus from the start. But here's another question too, right? If your whole priority is how to reduce emissions, I have a simple question for you. How much emissions do you reduce globally when a Canadian business moves down to the United States?
Yeah, great point. Or when, it's not like anyone is going to stop driving their car. They're either going to buy their oil from Canada or the United States or another ethical oil producer, or they'll buy it from Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, Nigeria, whatever. My point is, you could shut down every barrel of oil produced in Canada. Not a single car would no longer drive. We would just be buying 5 million barrels more per day from OPEC conflict countries. I mean, it's not like shutting down Canadian industry will stop anyone from driving. They'll just buy their oil from the bad guys. Well, I tell you, we're in, that old saying, we're in the best of times, we're in the worst of times. I can't say we're in the best of times. I just think we're in the worst of times from an economic point of view, but hopefully Canadians will wake up to that. Franco, and I know you guys are going to fight like hell. You always do. Thanks for taking the time with us today, as you always do.
Hey, it was my pleasure. And folks, keep up the fight. Don't get discouraged.